The morning cracked open with a low, steady hum. A lawnmower 2 houses down, a dog's bark that stopped as quickly as it started, and the soft rattle of bicycle bells on the sidewalk. Sunlight slanted through maple leaves, painting shifting gold patterns across driveways and the dust that caught in the air. Inside, the kitchen smelled of dark coffee, a sharp, warm tang that pulled everyone upright, and something sweet cooling on the counter, perhaps cinnamon toast or a pie from last night. Mothers folded shirts in living room armchairs, while fathers shook the sleep from their voices and read headlines aloud. The radio chirped a morning DJ whose voice felt like a neighbor. Kids jammed their sneakers on, Googled the zipper-on jackets, and set off with backpacks that smelled faintly of crayons and new books. The suburb woke slowly but together, stitched by small rituals that, in hindsight, were the quiet heartbeats of family life. Walk into a 1970s kitchen, and your hands remember the oak veneer of cabinets before your eyes do. The air is thick with the faint sweet sour of windowed curtains and the metallic scent of a gas flame flickering under a kettle. Counters hold glass mixing bowls dusted with flour, a rotary egg beater with a wooden handle, and a vinyl radio glowing orange as it hums AM fare. Ads for detergents, and a weather report that sounds intimate. Sink water runs with a dull clank, and somewhere a fridge door shuts with a reassuring thump. Patterned linoleum underfoot cushions each step with a soft, familiar squeak. Small hands reach for sugar, sticky with the residue of jam. A father opens a can of soup with a lever-style opener, and a child watches the steady spiral of the tool. Everything in that room, faded countertops, chipped mugs, yellowed recipe cards, feels used, necessary, full of stories. The school smelled like chalk dust warmed by the sun through tall windows and the faint tart of apple-scented paste. Desks lined up in obedient rows bore the faint graffiti of pens and pencil carvings, initials, a heart around 2 names. A teacher's shoes tapped a steady rhythm across linoleum as she wrote in precise white letters on a green chalkboard, the squeak of chalk punctuating her instructions. Outside, the bus hissed and coughed to a stop, yellow paint dulled by miles of small hands pressing against the glass. In the hallway, lockers clanged and teachers exchanged small jokes at the water fountain. Recess was a riot of motion, sneakers squeaking, the metallic ring of the tetherball pole, and a sweet, sticky tang from popsicles melting down chins. Report cards were folded like secret maps. Every little ritual, the locker combination, the passing of a note under a desk, the homeroom pledge, threaded childhood into a predictable, comforting cadence. The trip to school was a slow, shared ritual. A stomp on the porch, a last check for homework, and the walk to the curb where a line of sleepy kids waited for the bus. Mornings in fall meant leaves drifting like small coins across lawns. In summer, the air smelled of hot asphalt and charcoal from backyard grills. The bus itself had a particular olfactory identity: rubber, faint oil, the sweet antiseptic of seat vinyl, and the driver's voice, gruff but reliable, called stops with a familiar cadence. Conversations were low and conspiratorial, traded bubblegum flavors, who got the center seat, a whispered promise about a game after school. Windows steamed in colder months, and fingers wrote secret messages on the glass. For many kids, that ride was the first social classroom, where friendships formed, alliances were tested, and the world beyond the family first came into view in small, repeated scenes. The corner store's bell announced your arrival with a single honest jangle. Shelves sagged under the weight of canned goods, whose hand-lettered labels promised comfort: soup, beans, tomato sauce. The produce section smelled faintly of damp soil and citrus. Apples weren't pre-waxed and felt rough under the thumb. A cigarette shelf glow and a register with big, heavy keys anchored the counter where a clerk, wearing a name tag, knew most customers by name. A cooler hummed with glass-bottled sodas that popped with a fizzy, metallic sweetness, and a rack near the checkout overflowed with comic books whose cover art shouted color. Children pressed faces to the glass, calculating candy budgets. Older folk lingered to swap gossip. A community notice board near the door announced church suppers, lost dogs, and political meetings, a paper mosaic of local life. The grocery was both marketplace and memory bank, an ever-present node where everyday needs and neighborhood stories intersected. Sunday afternoons moved with a slower clock. Lawns needed the neat horizontal strokes of a push mower. Fathers navigated hedges like a sculptor making tidy lines. The scent of cut grass hung in the air, mingling with the warm, yeasty perfume of bread or a pie cooling on a windowsill. Radios played soft church hymns or the afternoon ball game as light filtered through lace curtains. Kids dozed on sofas or chased each other in a lazy orbit around the yard. Plates of sandwiches and a thermos of lemonade sustained the small, holy business of the day: letter writing, homework catch-up, and phone calls to distant relatives on a rotary set. Neighbors greeted each other with a wave and a passing comment about the weather. The world felt manageable, the next week not yet crowding the door. That slow, ordinary Sunday folded into memory as a pause, a public holiday for domestic continuity. Evenings centered around a single rectangle of light, the television set. Families gathered on shag carpet and overstuffed couches. The TV's wooden console made the picture feel like a small window into a wider world. The channel guide was simple: 3 networks, and the schedule was social glue. Sitcoms that everyone watched together, news broadcasts that marked the day, and variety shows that spilled laughter into the room. Commercials, bright, insistent, and oddly comforting, sold products that promised easy domestic fixes. The remote was an emerging luxury. More often, someone got up to change the channel, an act that required consensus. Popcorn kernels cracked in a bowl, and the air smelled faintly of butter and perfume. The shared jokes and catchphrases from TV shows wormed into family language, and a show's theme song could carry you back decades in a single chord. Phones felt like furniture, heavy, reliable, anchored to a kitchen wall or hallway table. The rotary dial required the small choreography of thumb and finger, and each click and whir was a promise of a human voice at the other end. Conversations held time differently. You waited through the ring, listened to the familiar cadence of a relative's voice, and let sentences unfold without interruption. Calls could be long and meandering, updates about a neighbor's health, a detailed recital of last night's dinner, or a slow, careful confession between friends. Messages were scrawled on pads in looping handwriting and left under a magnet on the refrigerator. The absence of caller ID and text meant that each call was intentionally placed. Someone had to want to hear you to pick up. That slowness made the words themselves weighty. Every pause, laugh, and sigh registered like a small ceremony. A turntable in a living room was a kind of hearth. The tactile ritual of lifting a vinyl record from its sleeve, touching the grooves, and placing the needle felt reverent. The soft crackle before the first note landed was a small, comforting static. Albums were objects of devotion with artwork you could hold. Liner notes were read aloud and memorized. Later in the decade, tape decks and cassettes added portability. Mixtapes passed between friends like letters. Music echoed through rooms and porches. Acoustic guitars in the dusk. A radio tuned to AM or FM that moved from rock to soul to folk as moods shifted. Listening was communal. Family members commented on lyrics. Teenagers learned guitar riffs by pausing and replaying, and a particular song could become the shorthand for a summer or a heartbreak. The soundtrack of daily life wasn't background noise. It shaped moods, rituals, and memory. Summer nights carried their own slow choreography. The sticky punctuation of humidity, the chorus of crickets, and the gentle blinking of fireflies like shy lanterns. Children chased the tiny lights with jars until the lids rattled with captured stars. Adults sat on porches with iced tea, pant legs rolled up, knees sun-browned, swapping stories while fans turned lazily overhead. Street lamps threw pools of sodium orange onto sidewalks. Sometimes the neighborhood pooled together for block parties with folding tables and paper plates. The smell of charcoal and sweet corn lived in the air until the embers cooled. The smallness of the world felt safe. Porch lights were left on for lost kids who knew how to find their way. Bicycles leaned against fences like sleeping animals. Summer nights were a slow communal breath, warm, languid, and stitched together by the simplest pleasures. Walk into a 1970s living room and color arrives first. Deep avocado greens, burnt oranges, and chocolate browns braided into floral and geometric patterns. Wallpaper is not merely a background, it hums a busy, confident pattern of swirls and sunbursts. The furniture sits with rounded edges, overstuffed armchairs upholstered in velour, coffee tables with laminate tops, and lamps with fringed shades splitting the light into a soft, domesticated glow. Macrame plant hangers sway by the window. A shag rug eats footsteps and muffles conversation. Objects collect meaning, a ceramic ashtray from a holiday, a bowl of river stones from a summer trip, a large clock whose tick is the home's metronome. These choices are not design experiments. They are the visible grammar of a household's taste and social standing. Looking at a 70s interior is like reading an affectionate family portrait, every pattern and texture a small biography. The parlor was where the family held court. A wooden TV console anchored the room. Its glass screen reflected the amber glow of a table lamp, and the faces gathered to watch. The couch sagged in the middle like a well-loved promise, cushions bearing the memory of decades of conversations. A crochet throw covered an armrest, and family photos in mismatched frames clustered on the mantel. The air carried whispers of aftershave, starch, and the lingering sweetness of perfume. Visiting relatives sat on folding chairs brought out for the occasion, and a small tray of fudge squares or deviled eggs appeared as if by command. The parlor performed rituals, holiday visits, polite disagreements, and sleepy Sunday afternoons. It was a public convivial room where private moments stepped lightly and the household's social life unfurled. A child's bedroom in the 70s smelled like Play-Doh, sun-warmed wood, and the faint wax of crayons. Walls wore posters, a rock band's glossy face, a cartoon hero mid-leap, a calendar illustrated with pastoral scenes. A metal bed frame sat against a wall, layered with quilts stitched by grandmother and a pillow that had lost its first fullness. Toy boxes overflowed, matchbox cars with chipped paint, a plastic cowgirl, a battered board game whose tokens had survived multiple lucky streaks. A bedside table held a small lamp with a pleated shade and a stack of library books, dog-eared and loved. Night sounds were distant, a radiator ticking or a car faintly passing. In that room, the first secret notes were folded, scraped knees were kissed, and the horizon of dreaming stretched wide between the closet door and the windowsill. The kitchen was the house's most honest room, a workplace and a sanctuary. The table bore the patina of years, water-ringed coasters, a salt shaker with one chipped corner, a high chair tucked beneath like an old friend. Mothers and fathers orchestrated dinner with confident hands, a ladle scraping the pot, a knife chopping onions whose sharp smell cut through the room, a towel slung over the shoulder. Children claimed corners of the table to do homework or peel potatoes, learning arithmetic, alongside recipe measurements. Conversations slid from the mundane to the meaningful. Bills, neighborhood news, the neighbor's new baby, and laughter punctured the steam from pots. Evening light slanted through curtains and silverware chimed like small bells. In the 70s kitchen, hospitality and economy shared the same counter. The meal was both nourishment and ritual. Dinner time gathered voices into a single domestic chorus. Plates pressed into hands bore casseroles bubbling with cheese, mashed potatoes whipped to pillowy softness, green beans flashed with butter, and glasses of iced tea sweating on napkins. A carved wooden bread basket released the yeasty scent of warm rolls. Before the first fork touched the food, someone said grace or a smaller domestic ritual was performed. A toast, a joke, a request for someone to pass the salt. Conversation was orchestrated to include everyone. Questions about school, a parent's short update on work, a neighbor's anecdote, balancing seriousness with the ease of rhythm. Dinners were a small public stage. The family learned to listen, to squabble, and to make peace. The plate cleared slowly, and the lingering from the table extended a sense of belonging into the night. Thanksgiving arrived like a slow pageant. The household smells were magnified. Sage and roasting turkey, cinnamon and nutmeg on steaming pie. Children wore their holiday best, socks pulled high, and someone always ducked away to sneak a cranberry. Tables were extended with extra leaves, folding chairs filled the living room. Photographs were taken in front of the tree of family portraits as elders recited lineage and younger ones learned the choreography of passing plates. Conversations rode on memory, and stories were told and retold. A grandparent's migration, a childhood mischief, a prideful recall of a first job. The feast stitched temporal threads. The present tasted like the past. When the plates were clear, people softened into a particular holiday fatigue, part satisfied and part missive, holding a communal stomach full of gratitude and small domestic triumphs. Christmas in the 70s was tactile. The scratch of real pine needles, the clink of glass ornaments, and the soft rustle of tissue paper. Families hauled in trees that left sap on gloved hands and decked them with strings of colored bulbs that hummed when turned on. Presents were wrapped in glossy paper with curling ribbon and stacked beneath the tree in a slowly escalating pyramid of expectation. Stockings were hung with small practical gifts: oranges, candy canes, a comb, maybe a paperback. The radio carried carols and the occasional period pop Christmas hit. The television offered specials that families watched huddled around. The magic felt handcrafted, ornaments gathered over years, each a small monument to a season. The holiday anchored winter in a glow of neighborliness and ritualized giving. Birthday parties were small spectacles, helium balloons bobbing in a corner, paper plates with cheerful motifs, and a cake at the table's center crowned in candles. Children arrived in party dresses or pressed shirts, sticky palms clutching small token gifts wrapped in bright paper. Games were loud and immediate, pin the tail, musical chairs, and someone always managed to get the biggest slice first. The cake cutting was a mini-ceremony, a round of happy voices, a wish made and blown out with an earnest puff. Polaroid cameras captured the moment in square frames with soft focus and immediate physical prints. The energy was sugar-fueled and sincere. Nothing digital mediated the laughter. Even as adults watched, and occasionally organized, they relived a simpler, more tactile jubilee of attention. Rain transforms a home into a den. Water patters on window panes, and the world softens into a muffled watercolor. Indoors, people collect around lamps whose amber pools of light make reading possible without the glare of overhead fixtures. The radio plays detective serials or comforting daytime shows. The hiss of rain and the radio's low hum meet like old friends. Children build forts out of quilts and couch cushions and stage shadow puppet shows beneath a blanket lit by a flashlight. The kitchen smells of stewing soup or slow-cooked stew, and a kettle sings on the stove. Rainy days demand slowed, domestic attention, letters answered, photos arranged into albums, the quiet revisioning of ordinary things into kinder shapes. They accumulate as memories' soft days, which in later life read like small, calm islands. The 1970s had a domestic safety born of predictability. Neighbors who knew your name, streets where kids felt allowed to wander, front porches where afternoon visitors were expected rather than alarming. Doors were often left unlocked during the day. A lost child knew to go to Mrs. Larkin down the block for help. People relied on small redundancies: the corner store clerk who might watch a package until you picked it up, a school bus driver who knew the family's rhythm, and a mail carrier who learned which house received extra holiday cards. Safety was less policy and more social fabric, an informal network of recognition and reciprocal courtesy. It wasn't perfect. No era is. But it was a texture of trust that, whether real or romanticized later, shaped the feeling of belonging in a small town or suburban life. Small towns wore themselves plainly. Main Street with its neat storefronts, a barber pole turning lazily, and white picket fences keeping memories within tidy yards. Men lingered on benches outside the hardware store, reading the paper or offering weathered advice. Shop owners polished window displays that reflected slow commerce rhythms. The sidewalks held stenciled names of establishments and the occasional hand-painted sign advertising a weekend sale. Church bells marked the week in helpful, audible increments, and children's laughter added bright punctuation. These streets were both stage and safety net, a place where people learned civics, rumor, and neighborly economy. In the 70s, the small town was a social map as legible as any census, its features familiar enough to be comforting and idiosyncratic enough to feel like home. Cars of the 70s announced themselves with weight and presence. Long hoods, sweeping chrome bumpers, bench seats upholstered in vinyl. Vehicles were not just transport, but statements of mobility and aspiration. The smell of petrol and seat leather was distinctive. Heating systems rattled a little before settling into a warm hum. Men checked oil and tinkered under hoods on Saturday mornings, cigarette ash forming its own little history on the fender. Family station wagons held camping gear and school projects. Convertibles offered the intoxicating feel of wind and speed along open roads. License plates marked state pride. Bumper stickers hinted at politics, humor, or a devotion to high school sports. Driving was a sensorial ritual. The click of turn signals, the soft thump of vinyl seats, the radio tuned between stations as landscapes slipped by. Gas stations were community crossroads, a place where the price of petrol was read on rotating numbers and the service attendant pumped gas with a practiced dance. Inside the small shop, shelves offered road snacks and maps folded like secret instructions. Grease-streaked mechanics leaned against racks of tires, speaking in the economy's blunt language and trading repair tips like weather. Coffee and paper cups steamed at the counter for lone drivers and truckers, the dark liquid cutting the fog of an early morning. A hand-wash car and a neighborhood mechanic were small local legends. Everyone knew which station would keep your battery until a neighbor could help. Against the vastness of highways, the gas station was a reliable, human-scale pit stop, both practical and social. Malls arrived as new social geographies, tiled corridors lined with storefronts where teenagers learned the choreography of public life. Escalators hummed and brought visitors to skylit centers where fountain water flashed midday sunlight. Department stores anchored each end like civilizing institutions, offering everything from dresses to small appliances. The mall was a climate-controlled village where you could window shop, meet friends, and eat under the neon of food courts that still smelled of frying oil and sweet syrup. For teens, it was a stage to be seen. For parents, a place to buy better-dressed shoes. Malls reconfigured daily patterns. Shopping became an outing, a social event, and a place where trends diffused quickly across suburban networks. Drive-in theaters were cinematic rituals, where cars arranged themselves like small amphitheaters, and the night air carried the smell of buttered popcorn. Couples cuddled through coming attractions in the privacy of a car's back seat. Families piled into station wagons with blankets and thermoses. Speakers clipped to windows offered mono sound with a slight echo, the occasional insect chirp punctuating quiet scenes. The screen was an enormous, luminous presence, a communal sky of stories. Teenagers practiced kissing-lit hopes under starlight. Kids fell asleep as the last credits rolled. Drive-ins combined spectacle, intimacy, and suburban accessibility in a way that felt both modern and enchantingly simple. Parks were the suburban commons, where blankets spread on grass and kids raced between trees. The smell of picnic coleslaw and grilled hot dogs mixed with sunscreen and river mud. Boating docks creaked as rowboats drifted lazily. The water glittered with the afternoon sun. Swing sets squeaked in a rhythm that belonged to summer itself, and tree trunks wore initials carved by steady hands and first loves. Families returned year after year, marking growth in a child's height against the same fence post. Weekend picnics were low-stakes celebrations. Potato salad in Tupperware, a thermos of coffee, and a portable radio playing soft hits. Parks codified a leisure accessible to many, choreographing small seasonal pleasures into a steady civic habit. County fairs were a carnival of provincial pride. Midway lights blinked as rides turned, the Ferris wheel spinning slow and lofty, while the sweet smell of cotton candy and funnel cake clung to the air. Livestock barns hummed with the low grunt of prize-winning cows and the proud chatter of exhibitors explaining breed lines. Homemakers entered quilts and preserves in competition judged with solemnity. Teen bands practiced on makeshift stages. Talent shows crowned small-town celebrities. Colorful banners and the call of barkers created a joyful chaos in which the year's social life crystallized. Fairs were showplaces for craftsmanship and community, places where local identity paraded with joy, scent, and spectacle. Life on a farm followed the calendar of seasons. Dawn arrived early and intensely. The squeak of milking, the smell of hay and manure, and the slow, patient work of animals needing hands. Tractors traced furrows like careful calligraphy. Barns smelled of wood and warm animals. Children learned to read weather as a farmer reads lines of a script. Clouds, wind, humidity. Harvests were both celebration and anxiety, the reward for long hours and a race against weather. The rural rhythm taught a deep reciprocity with land and labor. Those who grew food for the country often found their stories written in soil and seed. Farm life was tough, intimate, and marked by a rugged kind of pride that reverberated through families and communities. Road trips stitched the vastness of America into personal maps. Families loaded suitcases, snacks, and maps, folded like origami, and set off to see landmarks promised in guidebooks. Neon signs on Route 66, the yawning expanse of Grand Canyon, roadside diners with pie displayed under glass domes. Motels offered neon welcome and slightly springy mattresses. Kids measured time in miles and hours of license plate spotting. The radio played a road mix as landscapes changed from cornfields to desert, and diners served coffee in heavy cups. Road trips mixed the mundane, traffic, rest stops, with the sublime surprise of an unfamiliar town's charm, making memory out of motion and shared curiosity. Community life in the 70s thrived in volunteerism. PTA meetings where mothers and fathers debated school plays, church suppers whose desserts were map-like spreads of domestic skill, and neighborhood cleanups organized by neighbors who knew each other's names. These gatherings were the civic glue. They taught children about public responsibility and adults about small-scale leadership. Rummage sales funded school trips, bake sales underwrote library purchases, and veterans' parades honored quiet sacrifices. The social machinery of community was small and local, and participation was expected, not performative. It created a rhythm of belonging, where people invested time and energy in communal projects that produced both material benefits and the sense that someone cared.